Welcome to Marcor Studios, where here we will be interviewing different industry professionals and educating our homeowners as well as the industry as a whole. We hope you enjoy the show. Good morning and welcome to Marcor Studios. I am here with Scott. Scott, how are you doing? Thanks for coming out today.
Thanks so much for having us. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So talk to me. What do you do? You're an attorney. What firm are you with? What kind of law do you practice?
The name of our law firm is McIntyre, Donohue, Accardi, Salmonson Riordan, and it's a law firm that's been in business 70 years representing injured workers. 80% of what we do are New York State on-the-job workers' compensation cases. We do some Social Security, disability, and disability retirement work. For that small percentage of people that can't get back to work after an on-the-job injury, I'd estimate 10% of our clients or less. And we're located, our main office is in Bayshore. We used to have satellite offices all through the downstate area.
Okay.
COVID kind of changed that a little bit.
Yeah.
But with that said, 16 attorneys in the support staff to go along with that, about 60 people working for us altogether.
Wow. So not a small outfit.
We're pretty big for what we do. And, you know, the firm's been in business quite a while and has, knock on wood, a good reputation in terms of what we do. So we're real proud of what we do.
So there's so many different angles of law. What made you pick this?
It was actually an accident to get started.
No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended as well. I started doing business and corporate type of stuff, and I seemed to work for one crazy person after another. And funny enough, my wife is an attorney with the firm as well.
Okay.
She got into the industry, and she's like, I really like what I do. It's really kind of fun. She was working for another firm at the time. She goes, I can get you a job in here. Why don't you try it out and see, how you like it? And it was sort of like a temporary stopping ground. I was sort of like, am I going to stay? Am I going to go? And then about 3 or 4 years in, I'm like, I can really make a difference here. There are a lot of people that could really use our help that are, underrepresented, that don't know what they're doing in terms of this forum and with insurance companies. And I decided I was going to stay. And after that, kind of worked on developing, business relationships with unions and people that send us work.
Okay. That's awesome. So workers' compensation, people are very it's a pretty broad term. Mm-hmm. Can you explain to, our listeners are really homeowners, people within the industry that, we want to be able to educate on the things maybe they don't know or don't know that they don't know. What is workers' compensation?
I'll try to cover that. So workers' compensation is not considered a lawsuit. It's a claim for insurance benefits, first of all. And it's really a claim that covers two things. It covers medical care and certain financial benefits when people are either out of work, or certain cash awards based on permanent damage that's caused by an on-the-job injury. Now, as I mentioned before, 80% of what we do are those cases, and the remaining part of it's Social Security disability. So sometimes people think when they're coming to our law firm that they're like suing somebody, or, sometimes I get a reaction when I speak to somebody, especially somebody in the building industry. It's kind of like
me.
Actually, like you. That's actually what brought it to my forefront. It's kind of like, oh, geez, and they're all kind of taken aback. But what people don't realize is we're kind of instrumental in helping people get back to work off an on-the-job injury, and I'd kind of like to emphasize that for your audience.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, so what'll happen is, people are required to purchase workers' compensation insurance if they're going to run jobs. If they're a contractor or general contractor or a subcontractor, they're required to have it if they have employees. And if they don't have it, they can get in trouble, basically with the state and things like that. Once they have it, they've paid for the insurance, and then sometimes it's like their employees have difficulty in terms of getting at benefits. You and I had a quick conversation. I know you're in the roofing business, possibly among other things.
Yeah.
What happens if one of your key people goes down off an on-the-job injury, and, you paid for this insurance, and now, your key person needs a major shoulder surgery, and the insurance company says, we don't think we should have to pay for that. Then who's hamstrung? It's the business owner,
Yeah.
So we're kind of instrumental in terms of getting people back to work, networking with doctors that we know to try to expedite things. Sometimes our people will see people without claims numbers and things like that to try to get them healthy, because the faster the intervention starts, the faster people can get back to work.
Yeah. So, I mean, we know it's important to have it. We also know in this industry, it's very easy for people to try and work around it and say that they don't have employees or they're opting out of workers' compensation. And what kind of exposures does that put out there for a
You
contractor.
gotta have to worry about that as a contractor. It's something to be concerned about. First of all, I recommend that like everybody have workers' compensation insurance, because I've seen what happens in our courts when people don't have workers' compensation insurance. And the state is really cracking down on people for not having it, at all with regard to it. It's probably a better conversation in terms of like what specifically should be involved in each policy with like an insurance broker type of guest.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't deal with that on a daily basis.
I mean, I'm in the middle of our comp audit right now, and, trying to classify your employees and making sure that they're in your payroll with the certain codes, and making sure that, your managers are classified at one rate versus a roofer's at another rate versus a siding guy's at another rate. It's important to really, as a business owner, understand the reasoning behind it.
Right.
A roofer at a, $21, $22 per $100 rate, whereas a guy's getting paid off the books, they're dodging 20% or 22% really of just workers' comp alone.
Right.
So for every $100 that I pay out a roofer, I'm paying $22 just to workers' compensation, approximately.
That's a little out of the scope as to what I deal with on a daily basis, because we're dealing with, what happens when an injured worker gets hurt on the job. Our firm represents the injured workers.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's important. I mean, I'm sure like one of the things the audience is concerned about is like, well, how do I protect myself, right?
Yeah, so fill us in. How do you protect yourself with that?
Well, with those sorts of things, basically like any other sort of insurance, like a car insurance or anything like that, you want to be as careful and know what your coverage is and
Correct.
be as well informed as possible.
Yep.
Obviously, it kind of makes sense to talk to a knowledgeable broker or somebody that knows that and can guide you through that. But I would really recommend that contractors try to be just as honest as possible, because it tends to catch up with you if you don't.
Yeah, and then people underreport is another thing that, a lot of people don't realize, that at the end of the year, you're going to get an audit, and that audit, you have to classify those codes properly. If, somebody's, and I would imagine that runs into something that becomes a problem with you if somebody's classified under the wrong workers' compensation code.
It can, a little bit less. I mean, in court, like basically, if there's coverage, I mean, it's a disaster if people don't have coverage, more for the employers than for the employees. Because the state has something called an uninsured employers fund that'll step in that spot. And just in case your audience doesn't know, maybe we should just cover that pretty quickly.
That would be great.
The uninsured employers fund is basically a fund that the state set up for when there isn't coverage. Now, everybody's supposed to have coverage, and if they don't, they can get in trouble. But of course, not everybody does have coverage. So what happens to those injured workers when there is no coverage? Well, basically, the uninsured employers fund was set up so that all insurers in the state are required to pay a certain, percentage of their premiums into the uninsured employers fund to fund it. And then what happens is the uninsured employers fund acts as the insurance company. Now, for our purposes, when we go to court, when we're dealing with the uninsured employers, those cases tend to move a little bit more slowly, because they're very careful. They want to make sure
that they're paying out the right things.
Correct. They want to make sure that the person actually worked there, and there's actually more extensive litigation with that. But once they are held liable and they do pay those claims, the second arm, which is important for the audience to know, is a collections arm, and they're going to go after whoever should have had that coverage.
That was my main question. So where does that put the contractor if you didn't have it, and there's going to be penalties then in that case?
Substantial, and sometimes even like bankrupting type of penalties.
Yeah,
I mean, it gets really bad.
I don't think that people realize how serious this is, and how many people try and cut the corners with the workers' compensation and paying guys off the books and thinking, oh, well, I'll just stick them on payroll for a couple of days a week. Like, that doesn't work. You have to actually, these are things people investigate. They're going to be things that people realize that, you can't just be paying a guy cash and opening up Pandora's box potentially, because there is this fund. That fund will then eventually come and bite you in the butt.
And I see sort of worse things as well. Sometimes people think they're going to get cute and they're going to hire somebody that doesn't speak the language, that doesn't know the laws, that might not be here legally. They're going to hire them and put them on their job site thinking they're a disposable worker, right? Something happens to them, there's no way they're going to follow up on that. And, sorry for whatever happens to him and his family. I mean, those cases, we strongly litigate. And as claimants attorneys, we have a pretty good success rate with regard to those cases. So to your point from before, sooner or later, it's going to bite you, and bite you hard.
What about like the whole day laborer thing? Like, people say like, oh, well, my insurance covers, X amount of day laborers. Like, and that general fund, I would imagine you have a day laborer for, a day or two, and you paid them cash or whatever the case was. That's why we're so by the book of what we do. that I would imagine even the day labor thing, yeah, it might be covered, but that's going to circle back and say, hold on, wait, we're unfortunately, we're in a safety group, so we had a little bit more of that, like, extra set of eyes, too.
One of the things I was going to suggest in terms of how contractors protect themselves, the safety groups, any sort of things that the contractors can do in terms of taking safety courses.
So what is a safety group?
A safety group basically is an organization of a bunch of other people that, like-minded individuals that are trying to save on premiums, that are trying to be, quote unquote, safer, and they have a group that kind of monitors the whole thing to try to cut down on the job accidents.
Yeah.
In concept, it's great. I love the idea of that because I want people to call me if they get hurt on the job. I'm not necessarily rooting for people to get hurt on the job.
Of course.
If we can avoid accidents altogether, that's what it really should be all about.
Yeah.
The safety group ideally, looks to do that. Sometimes, from my perspective, I think the people administering the safety group get a little overzealous with certain things they do, but probably a conversation for another day.
I mean, for roofing related safety groups, I think that, we have to focus on our experience modification. We have to keep the safety precautions in place. And to us, I feel that being able to say that you're in a safety group holds you to a higher standard. So the extra precautions they take don't really bother me because it's something that I embrace. I want to be able to have my guys working safe. We just had a meeting this morning.
I applaud that. I think that's great. Honestly, because of what I do for a living and what you do for a living, you might be a little bit more experienced with what the safety group on a day-to-day basis is requiring of the employers than I am, because I don't see that side as much. But the concept is, take as many courses as you can, and speak to the brokers and sort of say, hey, what can I do to cut these costs? Because everybody, whether it's workers' comp insurance, whether it's automobile or insurance, unfortunately, we live in a day and age where insurance costs are not going down.
Yep.
So if there's anything that you can do that will help keep those premiums low, including shopping things and all that, I'm a big fan of that. And that's part of how I think, contractors can hopefully look to protect themselves with regard to that stuff.
Any cases that you have worked on that specifically stand out, involving construction that you want to share with us?
Involving construction, I mean, we've seen a whole bunch of, some construction cases move straightforward. And, if people are honest, like it sounds like some of the steps that you're taking with regard to things, sometimes somebody got hurt on the job, it's an accident that got hurt on the job, everything's reported properly, and those cases can move a little bit quickly.
Yeah.
But again, some of the construction type of stuff that we do see, it's, depending on how complicated the job site is, you got a whole bunch of subcontractors there. You got some people that are reporting all their people properly, like it sounds like, you were telling me earlier in this discussion. You got other people that maybe they're not so accurate with who's on the job site and where and all those sorts of other things. Then you get somebody who's maybe undocumented, maybe working there, but not exactly sure who they work for or things like that. And those get heavily litigated, and it's a mess. Which
is why they push to settle, because the cost of litigation is so much more. So you end up paying a settlement, and now the settlement ends up increasing your experience mod, and it becomes a whole domino effect.
It certainly can with regard to that. Yeah. But again, to do there are certain things that, like car insurance, right? Everybody has to have car insurance in order to drive a car.
Yep.
Still doesn't mean everybody does, but people are required to have it.
Yep.
If you have it and you take all the things like the driver safety courses and stuff to lower your premiums, and you walk out and you decide you're going to be the safest driver on the road, many times that'll help you avoid accidents, but it's not going to help you avoid everything.
Correct.
So there's some spots where, some people are going to do all their due diligence and accidents are going to happen. And unfortunately, that's part of probably a cost of doing business to an extent. But we all really want to work together to try to limit that stuff. And I'm a firm believer in those sorts of things. And I kind of feel like we're playing a little bit of a role in making sure that business continues to go forward by our role in terms of, okay, we're really sorry this did happen. Because I see the human end of things on the injured worker side. Now you have a legitimate worker that's working on either a construction site or any job. They have this really, significant injury. Many people are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Some people are single parents. Now all of a sudden it's like, I was counting on this money to put food on the table to keep a roof over my kids' heads.
Yep.
What's going to happen now? And sometimes basically our role where I get to do our job the way I like this even more than the law. I sit people down and I'm like, listen, I'm really sorry this happened to you. There's a path to get you well. This is what we're going to do to fast forward we're going to get you into this doctor. You have a shoulder injury. We're going to get you in to see a shoulder specialist ASAP. We're going to get those diagnostic tests. It's either going to be some conservative care, in which case we're going to get you paid weekly, at least workers' comp benefits while out of work. And then we want to, if you need surgery, focus on that. You don't want to wait too long on the surgery. You'll have to make a decision, get it or don't get it. And then, the plan is to get you healthy and back to work. And then you could see the light go on. It's like, oh, okay. Maybe I won't lose my house. Maybe my kids will eat this week.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize that workers' comp, you can't really live off of that. It's really
No, in fact, I think the whole system is one of those things that they designed it to basically encourage people to get back to work. They want to cover the medical care. And they want to give people basically, in general concept, oversimplifying, enough to kind of get by.
Yep.
But they don't want to make people too comfortable because it's not supposed to turn into a retirement.
Correct. But a lot of that's where, somebody in my seat, listen, we've got two sides of it right now. So we've got one guy who, accidentally cut his hand, had to have a pretty decent surgery, and he keeps calling me every day. And obviously we check in with him all the time. And he's like, I just want to get back to work, but he's a carpenter. He has to work with his hands.
Right.
So I said, listen, you obviously can't do this right now. So why don't we bring you in and let's put you on we'll put you as a project manager, at least get you back to work.
That's a fantastic thought process because that's good for everybody. That he can at least contribute. If you
he's like, I don't want to keep doing puzzles every day. I want to get back to work.
But I mean, if you have the capability in your job to be able to do that, not every employer can because of the physical nature of the job, certain physical natures of the job. Like I use the example all the time. I'm like, this gentleman's a carpenter. He's got to be at a certain healed level to get back to work.
Correct.
If I have the same injury as a lawyer, my job is more like a desk job or talking.
Correct.
I can get back to work a lot faster.
Yep.
My job's to educate people and say, hey, listen, we want to get you back to work, but with the carpenter example, working in a roofing company, we don't want to have you back roofing with that bum hand sooner than because you don't want that setback and to prevent you. But if your employer will work with you to get you into that spot, that's fantastic because he's productive. He can collect a paycheck. You're like, okay, we can have him doing something for the company. We can move it forward. I wish more employers were able to think like that.
I mean, I guess not everybody has those opportunities to be able to do that. And, we try our best to do that type of stuff. But, then we've got the flip side of the false claims where somebody got hurt doing something else, said it happened at work, working on workers' comp, and we know is getting paid cash elsewhere. Those are the false claims, and those are the ones that I'm actually really happy to see that the Workers' Comp Board they're investigating those.
They're investigating those. They're cracking down on that stuff, and as it should be, by the way.
100%.
I mean, here I am, an injured worker attorney. I don't want to be knowingly representing people like that.
Of course.
It makes everybody look bad,
yes.
So those people, if you can weed them out in terms of figuring out what's what, sometimes it's not always as easy. But the ones that you can clearly tell, got hurt elsewhere or are making things up or, the book should be thrown at them.
Yeah. We
don't need that. Nobody needs that.
No, it's what's it's hurting a lot of people's experience mods as well. And, that becomes an issue as well as the undocumented workers and the guys getting paid cash. It's a domino effect because this fund is there to pay out legitimate claims. Lastly, what do you want people to know about your firm that we haven't discussed or, what the things that you do or anything that stands out that you want to share with us?
The biggest thing is we're a law firm that's been in business for 70 years representing injured workers. And we do, our mainstay is when people get hurt on the job, we want people to give us a phone call. In terms of attorney's fees in the industry, the lawyers only get paid by injured workers. If they are able to get people money or financial benefits in court, then the insurance companies pay them, and it's a statutory 15% attorney's fee.
Okay.
If lawyers can't get people benefits, they don't get paid an attorney's fee. So what that means in English, all consultations are free of charge. I want really people to consider us as a resource. I want injured workers to not be afraid to give us a call, if they need that kind of help. And I'd like basically the construction audience, hopefully, and hopefully this podcast leads towards it, to view us as like part of a tool to help people get back to work and being more on the same side.
You mean not like I did when I first heard that you were a workers' comp attorney and I was like, oh, we don't like people like you.
which is fine, but that led to this conversation.
100%.
And you gave me an opportunity to explain maybe more of what we knew.
And now you're a resource.
Hopefully I'm a resource, and hopefully I explained some things that you didn't know, and hopefully some things that your audience didn't know about how we could be helpful.
I've got one last thing for you. So a big line that we hear in the industry is, well, that's not how I did it for the last 30 years. How does that come into play when we talk about workers' compensation from 30 years ago to today?
Things have really changed a lot in the past 30 years. 30 years ago, things were basically a lot more claimant-oriented. The whole concept behind the workers' compensation law in general was it came about with the Industrial Revolution. People were falling into machines, and then what would happen is the injured workers would be suing their employers, and the employers would starve them out. You'd have people basically, starve to death. You'd have, they wouldn't be getting any benefits. And eventually the state said, you know what, enough. We're going to come up with this workers' comp system. We're going to remove fault from it. If basically you got hurt on the job, even tripping over your own feet is a workers' compensation case.
I was told even working remote, and if you trip up your stairs, that's which is crazy.
Well, I mean, but the concept, that's like the new modern modification, but the concept is, it's supposed to be free of fault. And when you gave up the fault, what you also gave up as a worker was your right to sue your employer. If somebody's got workers' comp coverage and they work for you, they can't sue you. It's just this workers' comp claim.
Is that nationally, or is that just in New York?
It does go state by state, so everybody's got different rules.
But in New York, you can't sue your employer.
Basically, yeah. There's certain exceptions, again, too much for this podcast. But with that said, so that's kind of how it works out. So when that happened, the concept was it was supposed to be because of what was given up when the law came about, claimants were supposed to gave up a lot, and it was supposed to be easier to make the claims to get the medical care and the financial benefits while out. In the past 30 years, it's gotten a lot more, the carriers have gotten a little bit more aggressive. They're claiming fraud in a lot more spots, sometimes unnecessarily so. The best example I can think of is, sometimes you injure your arm and you're entitled to a cash award related to that, and you're supposed to disclose old injuries. Now, of course, if you fail to disclose the fact that you had a major, shoulder reconstruction before that, that's a legit insurance fraud issue that you should be cracked down on before. People are sort of taking it to the extent of, in the third grade, you fell off your bike and you forgot to tell us, that this happened. And because you did that, judge, as an insurance company's lawyer, we want to throw the whole case out. The person committed insurance fraud. To me, the pendulum has swung back like a little too far that way. But from our perspective, it's job security, because I think people need lawyers on the injured worker side, more than ever, because the 30 years difference, it's nowhere near as easy as it used to be to, follow up on those claims.
Yes. I mean, and I guess technology and the ability to access, who's posting things on social media that they're on vacation and they're doing this and
whole different conversation.
We could go down the rabbit hole.
Absolutely.
I could say it from an employer standpoint, it's very complicated, because let's say, all of a sudden I hire somebody as a roofing contractor to get up on a roof on a daily basis, and he maybe had fallen at a previous job. Due to HIPAA violations, I can't ask if he's had prior injuries. I don't know that maybe he has a titanium rod in his back or something in his arm, whatever, plates and screws, and then something happens and he gets injured again, and there's pre-existing. You also have now the Department of Labor issues, because it's discrimination if you don't hire somebody like that. So it does put today's employer in a very tough position. So on that note, I just wanted to thank you for being here. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
They can certainly reach us at our 800 number. It's 866. Let me just check that out, because I don't give it out all the time. 557-7500, or at licomplaw.com, or the main office number is 631-665-0609. Please feel free to call us with anything, even, employer side, injured worker side. However you think we can help. The worst that happens is I'm a pretty good networker and resourcer in general. So if people are like, well, listen, I got a question on this law thing, and it might not be exactly what you do, the worst I'm going to tell you is I don't know somebody that does that. But if I know somebody good, I can say, this is, my friend Bob might be able to help with that. Why don't you call him? Here's his number.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the education.